I want to talk about a number today, $40,000. Not because it is a round number that sounds good in a YouTube title, but because when I actually sat down and ran the math on something I see constantly, something I have watched friends do, colleagues do, clients do, something I have partially done myself, $40,000 is roughly what it costs you over 5 years. Sometimes more, rarely less. And the frustrating part is that nobody is doing this because they are stupid. Nobody is doing this because they do not care about their financial future. Most of the people making this mistake are reasonably smart, reasonably hardworking people in their 30s who are doing what feels logical at the time, what feels responsible, what feels like the adult thing to do. That is what makes it so expensive. The mistakes that cost you the most are never the ones that feel obviously wrong. They are the ones that feel completely reasonable while you are making them. The ones that have a good explanation attached to them. The ones you could defend in a conversation without breaking a sweat. So let's talk about what this mistake actually is. And more importantly, let's talk about why it is so easy to make when you are 35 with a family, a mortgage, a job, a kid who needs things, and 17 other obligations competing for your attention and your money every single day. The mistake is not one thing, it is a pattern. I want to be upfront about this because when I say the $40,000 mistake, I am not talking about one single catastrophic decision. I am not talking about losing money in a bad investment or getting scammed or making some dramatic error in judgment that you will tell stories about at dinner parties for the next decade. I am talking about a pattern of smaller decisions that accumulates into a very large number over time. And the reason I am framing it this way is because one catastrophic decision is actually easier to avoid. You see it coming, it feels big. Your gut tells you something is off, and if you are paying any attention at all, you pump the brakes. The pattern I am talking about does not feel big in any individual moment. Each piece of it feels manageable. Each piece of it feels like a reasonable trade-off given everything else going on in your life. Each piece of it comes with a perfectly sensible justification. But when you add it all up across 5 or 10 years, the number is real and it is significant. The pattern has four main components. And I am willing to bet that if you are in your mid-30s, you recognize at least three of them in your own life right now. Component 1, the car situation. Let me ask you something direct. What are you driving right now, and more importantly, what is it actually costing you every month when you add everything up? Because here is what I see constantly among people in their 30s. They buy more car than they need because they can technically afford the payment. The key word there is technically. The bank approved them. The monthly number fits in the budget if nothing unexpected happens and nothing expensive breaks and nobody gets sick and the job stays stable. And so they sign. The average new car payment in America right now is somewhere around $700 a month. That is before insurance, which on a newer vehicle is going to run you another $150 to $200 minimum depending on where you live and your driving record. So before you have turned the key once, you are looking at $850 to $900 a month just to have a car sitting in your driveway. Now here is where it gets interesting and where most people stop doing the math. A car is not an investment, it is not an asset in any meaningful financial sense. The moment you drive it off the lot, it starts losing value at a rate that would make your stomach turn if you thought about it too hard. Most new vehicles lose somewhere between 15 and 25% of their value in the first year alone. You are financing something that is actively working against your net worth from the moment you own it. I am not saying do not have a car. Obviously, you need a car. I am saying the decision about what car to have and how to pay for it is one of the most consequential financial decisions a person in their 30s makes. And most people treat it as an afterthought. They spend more time researching which streaming service to subscribe to than they spend honestly analyzing whether the car payment they are about to commit to for 60 or 72 months makes sense relative to their actual financial goals. Run the math with me. If you are spending $900 a month on transportation, payment plus insurance, versus $450 on a reliable used vehicle that you own outright or nearly own, that is $450 a month difference. Over 5 years, that is $27,000, invested consistently at a modest 7% annual return. That $450 monthly difference over 10 years becomes roughly $78,000. $78,000 from the car decision alone. I had a client a while back, guy in his late 30s, solid income, good job, came to me genuinely frustrated that his net worth was not growing the way he expected given what he was earning. We went through his actual monthly expenses together, and he was spending just over $1,100 a month between his car payment, insurance, and the maintenance costs on a vehicle that was only a couple of years old, but already had an issue that the dealership was telling him would cost several $1,000s to fix. $1,100 every single month for transportation, not for housing, not for food, not for his kids, just to get from point A to point B. When we restructured his situation and he moved into a paid-off used vehicle, his entire financial picture changed within 18 months. He went from feeling stuck to actually building something. Same income, one different decision. That is not a small thing, and it is not an abstract concept. It is a real outcome that I watched happen. Component 2, lifestyle inflation that happened without a decision. This one is sneakier than the car because at least with the car there is a moment where you physically sign something. There is a decision point you can look back on and identify. Lifestyle inflation in your 30s often does not have a decision point. It just happens gradually, and by the time you notice it, it has been happening for years. Here is how it typically plays out. You get a raise or a promotion, or your income grows in some meaningful way. Maybe your business does better than expected. Maybe you land a better job. Whatever the source, more money is coming in, and your standard of living adjusts upward to match the new income almost automatically, without any conscious, deliberate choice being made. The apartment becomes a slightly nicer apartment. The restaurant becomes a slightly more expensive restaurant more frequently. The vacation becomes a slightly longer or more elaborate vacation. The subscription services multiply in a way that is barely noticeable month to month. The grocery bill grows because you buy better stuff and you waste more because the waste feels affordable now. The kids' activities add up. Sports, lessons, camps, gear, each one individually reasonable, collectively significant. None of these individual changes feel dramatic. None of them feel like a financial mistake in the moment, but collectively they absorb the entire income increase. Sometimes more than the entire income increase, and you end up earning more than you did 3 years ago, and somehow feeling like you have less room than before. This is lifestyle inflation, and the genuinely insidious thing about it is that it does not feel like overspending. It feels like living appropriately for your income level. It feels like you have earned the right to live this way because you worked hard to get here, you put in the years, you built the career, you deserve to live well. And maybe you do. I am not here to tell you that enjoying your money is wrong or that you should feel guilty for wanting a comfortable life. The point is not deprivation. The point is the difference between intentional lifestyle upgrades that you consciously decided to make because they genuinely matter to your quality of life, and passive lifestyle inflation that just happened because your income went up and your spending followed automatically without any real thought about whether that was the best use of the increase. The people who build serious net worth in their 30s are not necessarily the ones who earn the most. They are the ones who consistently capture a meaningful portion of every income increase instead of letting all of it get absorbed by expanded lifestyle. Even capturing 30% of each raise or income increase and directing it toward investments or debt reduction creates a compounding effect over time that is genuinely dramatic. If your income grows by $10,000 a year and you capture 30% of that, $3,000, and invest it annually over 10 years at 7%, that becomes roughly $41,000 from those contributions alone. If lifestyle inflation absorbs all of it, you have zero. Same income, completely different outcome. The only variable is one deliberate choice made consistently. Component 3, the insurance gap nobody talks about. I want to spend some time here because this one is the most invisible of all the components and potentially the most expensive over a lifetime. Most people in their 30s are underinsured in ways they do not realize until something goes wrong. And the problem is not that they have no insurance. The problem is that they have default insurance. Whatever came with the job, whatever the minimum was, whatever was easiest to set up and forget about, rather than insurance that actually reflects their real financial situation and their family's needs. Life insurance is the most obvious example. If you have a spouse, a kid, a mortgage, people and obligations that depend on your income, the question of what happens financially if you die tomorrow is not a morbid hypothetical. It is a real planning question, and a lot of people in their 30s either have no life insurance beyond a small employer provided policy that does not come close to replacing their income, or they have a whole life policy that a friend in finance talked them into years ago that is expensive and not particularly effective as either insurance or an investment. Term life insurance for a healthy person in their mid 30s is genuinely affordable. A substantial policy, enough to actually replace your income for 10 or 15 years, pay off the mortgage, fund your kids' education, costs less than most people assume. The people who do not have it are mostly not skipping it because of the cost. They are skipping it because it requires sitting with an uncomfortable question and making a decision, and there is always something more urgent competing for attention. Disability insurance is even more overlooked. Your ability to earn income is the most valuable financial asset you have in your 30s. If something happens to your health and you cannot work, your income stops. Your mortgage does not. Your family's expenses do not. Short-term disability through your employer covers a fraction of this risk for a limited period. Long-term disability coverage that actually protects your income in a meaningful way requires you to go get it, and most people never do. The insurance gap is not about spending more money on insurance. It is about spending the right money on the right coverage so that the financial plan you are building is not completely vulnerable to a single bad event. Component 4, the retirement math that feels fine until it does not. This is the one that people are most likely to disagree with me about, because most people in their 30s who are contributing to a 401k at all feel like they are handling this. They are contributing something, the employer is matching something, the account balance is growing, everything seems fine. Here is the uncomfortable reality. Contributing enough to get your employer match is not a retirement strategy. It is the starting point of a retirement strategy. The match is free money and you should absolutely take all of it. But stopping there because it feels like you are doing the responsible thing is a decision that will cost you significantly when you are in your 50s and running the actual numbers for the first time in a serious way. The standard guidance is to save 15% of your gross income for retirement, including any employer match. Most people in their 30s are saving somewhere between 3 and 8%. That gap compounded over 30 years is the difference between retiring with options and retiring with anxiety. I know 15% feels like a lot when you have a mortgage and kids and car payments and all the other things we have been talking about. I am not saying it is easy. I am saying that the math does not care what else is going on in your budget. The math just compounds. And the people who figure out how to get to 15% in their 30s, even if it takes a few years to get there, end up in a fundamentally different position than the people who stay at 6% because that is where they started and it never felt urgent enough to change. Why 35 is the critical age for all of this? I want to be direct about why I am specifically calling out 35 and not some other age. Your 20s are when you make the obvious mistakes. You do not save enough. You spend on things that do not matter. You do not think seriously about retirement because it feels like something happening to a future version of you that does not quite feel real yet. Most people get a partial pass on their 20s because the damage is still recoverable, and because frankly nobody had it completely together in their 20s. Your 40s are when the consequences of your 30s decisions start becoming visible and harder to course correct. The people who built habits and systems in their 30s start to see the compounding work in their favor. The people who did not start to feel the gap in a way that is harder to close with time, your mid-30s are the hinge point. The decisions you make between 32 and 38 have an outsized impact on where you end up at 50 and beyond. This is when compound interest starts to matter in a real and visible way. This is when the difference between capturing income growth and letting it disappear starts to show up concretely in your net worth. And this is also when life is objectively the most complicated it has ever been. More financial obligations than your 20s, more responsibility, more people depending on you, more decisions competing for your attention simultaneously, which is exactly why the mistakes I have been describing are so common at this age. Not because people are careless, but because they are genuinely stretched, and the long-term financial decisions are always the easiest ones to defer when something more immediate is demanding attention. I have two friends from college, same school, similar majors, similar starting salaries when they graduated. Both ended up in solid careers, both got married around the same time, both bought houses. On the surface, their trajectories looked almost identical through their late 20s. The difference showed up in their 30s. One of them made deliberate financial decisions in his early 30s, not dramatic ones. He drove a used car when everyone around him was financing new ones. He increased his 401k contribution every time he got a raise before he got used to the higher take-home. He kept his lifestyle roughly flat for 2 years while his income grew. Nothing heroic, nothing that required extraordinary discipline, just consistent, intentional choices made repeatedly over about 4 years. The other guy, same income range, same opportunities, let lifestyle lead. New car every few years, nice vacations, bigger apartment before he needed it. Nothing irresponsible exactly, nothing that felt like a mistake in any individual moment. Just the natural drift that happens when you are earning enough that the immediate consequences of spending are not visible. By the time they were both in their early 40s, the gap in their net worth was significant enough that one of them had genuine options and the other was starting to feel trapped by his monthly obligations. Same starting point, same general income, 10 years of different habits. That is the hinge point in practice. What $40,000 actually represents. Let me bring this back to the number because I want to make it concrete before we finish. $40,000 over 5 years from these four patterns combined is a conservative estimate. The car situation alone can account for 15 to 20,000 of it in opportunity cost. Lifestyle inflation absorbing income growth that should have been partially invested accounts for another significant chunk. The insurance gap is harder to quantify until something goes wrong, at which point it is very easy to quantify. And the retirement contribution gap compounds silently in the background. $40,000 invested at 35, growing at 7% annually until 65, is not $40,000 anymore. It is just over $300,000. That is what these decisions actually cost, not the immediate number, the compounded long-term number. 3 questions to sit with. I am not going to give you a checklist because checklists are how you feel productive without actually doing anything differently. Instead, I want to leave you with 3 honest questions. What is your total monthly transportation cost? Payment, insurance, maintenance, averaged out. And is that number proportional to your actual financial goals? The last time your income meaningfully increased, what percentage of that increase went toward building your net worth versus getting absorbed by your expanded lifestyle? Are you saving at least 15% of your gross income for retirement? And if not, what would it actually take to get there in the next 12 months? These questions are uncomfortable. That is intentional. The comfortable questions are not the ones that change anything. Here is the other thing I want to say before we finish, and it is maybe the most important thing. None of this requires perfection. I am not describing a life where you never buy a car you enjoy or never take a good vacation or never spend money on something that makes your daily life better. That is not a financial strategy. That is just misery dressed up as discipline. What I am describing is the difference between being intentional and being passive, between making a choice and letting a choice happen to you, between deciding how much of your income growth you are going to capture versus watching all of it disappear into a slightly more expensive version of the same life. The $40,000 mistake is not made by bad people or careless people. It is made by busy people, by people who have a lot going on and whose attention is pulled in a dozen legitimate directions simultaneously, by people who are doing a lot of things right and just have not gotten around to examining these specific patterns yet. The good news is that examining them is not actually that hard once you decide to do it. Running the real numbers on your car situation takes 30 minutes. Having an honest conversation with yourself about what you actually did with your last raise takes 10. Logging into your 401k and looking at your contribution percentage takes 5. The math is not complicated. The decisions are not complicated. The only thing that makes this hard is the inertia of not having done it yet, combined with the busyness of a life that is genuinely full of other things demanding your attention. The people who actually changed their financial trajectory in their 30s are not the ones who had some dramatic wake-up moment or found the perfect financial advisor. They are the ones who got honest with themselves about 2 or 3 specific things and made a couple of different decisions going forward. That is it. 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 decisions made differently and held consistently. You are already doing the hard part by thinking about this stuff. The rest is just following through. I will see you in the next one.